What's the plan, Tesla? Welcome back.
CyberSpace.
Empirical Trainers. Do you know what I mean? So like Empirical Trainers.
Welcome back.
Hello and welcome back to the CyberSpace podcast with your host, Josh from Empirical Training. CyberSpace is the podcast where we get to talk about cybersecurity issues in a non-judgmental, fun, relaxed environment. We share our combined expertise over 35 years working in the cybersecurity industry. We started together, we the Empirical Trainers, on our first professional job together, and we've since diverted our paths quite significantly, but we still keep in touch. And we thought, hey, let's get together every now and then and talk about some of the cybersecurity issues that we're facing in a daily basis, as well as what the world is facing, what we're seeing out there in the news. And even better, we run a cybersecurity community on schools at school.com/cybersec if you want to go check it out. And we have quite a few members in there. And for this episode of the podcast, as well as a few others, we've invited them to do it alongside us. So it's a live podcast stream with the chat, who get to participate in the discussion, get to throw us some questions, whether they're related to what we're discussing or whether it's some personal projects that they're working on. We get asked quite often, what are the top tools for doing this type of malware analysis? How would you go about solving for this problem? What resources were the best for you when you were kind of coming into cybersecurity? So it's really a safe space to ask any cybersecurity related questions. And so we're going to jump right into it, but I was going to introduce our hosts because we are going to jump straight into the discussion and discuss some of the big points that we've had in our community discussion about privacy, actually, and the implications for security of combining ChatGPT and the OpenAI and Apple partnership. You may have seen that Elon Musk said he was going to ban any Apple devices. There's definitely been a bit of hyperbole about what this could actually mean. We're still early days, but that's exactly what we need to do in the security world, right? We need to sound the alarm almost too early so that people start thinking about these problems before it's too late, right? Before it's out there on everyone's device and everybody's data is a lot more accessible, or they might even realize privacy implications. We'll talk a little bit about that too. So on the call today, we have the 5 members of Empirical Training. It's myself, Josh, so former security analyst and threat hunter, current product specialist, working in a global cybersecurity company. We have Robbie. He is our cybersecurity consultant, former SOC leader, works for a lot of different organizations now, helping them build and stand up security operations center. We have AJ, or Andrew, who is our incident response specialist. He works with financial institutions, helping them respond to incidents. So really, when it hits the fan, AJ jumps in and makes sure everything gets remediated and resolved, contained, before it becomes a real issue, before they hit the headlines, before any sensitive data is exfiltrated or ransomware can be deployed, things like that. And finally, last but not least, Vaughan. Vaughan is our AI specialist. He's a little bit more on the security engineering side, also has held SOC leadership roles, so knows exactly what people are looking for when it comes to the kind of a hiring process, and is really making the modern SOC be as streamlined as possible by combining it with AI automations, but making sure that the people are still involved where the people need to be, where nuance, where decision making, where lateral thinking is really required, because we ain't there yet with AI. All the hype, people talk about AI all the time in security, but we aren't there yet, and I don't think we're there for the foreseeable future yet, but there are obviously ways to make us more efficient. So that's the introduction to the Empirical Trainers. The 5th member as well, don't let me forget that one, is the community. So we have our community. I'll refer to them as chat. We might mention a couple of names as they talk to us. They have been part of this pod, so special thanks to them. And if you want to get involved, you need to join the school community. That's school.com/cybersec. Without further ado, let's dive straight into the topic. I want to talk on some of the discussions we've had in the school community and probably take them a little bit further. And the one that seems to be making the most noise in the last few weeks is the Apple and OpenAI partnership that was announced. There seems to have been a lot of boo. And AJ's an Apple fanboy. This man watches the conferences every year. In fact, did you watch it this year?
No, I used to watch them. Yeah, then we had a previous team lead, who was watching them in work while he was telling us to do our jobs. And yeah, to be honest, he was a bit of a lemon. And then I saw him watching them, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to be like that. So I stopped.
I don't want to be that guy.
But I watched all the recaps on YouTube and
watched the
highlights, yeah. And there's an iOS update. I'm looking at the top 5 new features and all that jazz. But then this has scared me, to be fair. But I don't know if it's going to push me away from it. I don't know. I'm pretty sucked in.
Of course not.
Yeah,
Die
and
hard fan there.
thanks, AJ, for using a safe word there. But you've already messed up our kind of PG rating earlier. I don't know if you even noticed. But
He was
so
a blooming lemon.
let's rewind then. So what is the news, in case we've got somebody on here who hasn't heard this at all? Does anyone want to take a stab at what was announced at the Apple conference?
Yeah, so they have announced that they are introducing. So OpenAI own ChatGPT, for anyone that doesn't know, and OpenAI are partnering with Apple, and Apple are going to be introducing ChatGPT across their products and services. So things like notes, emails, all of that will be running or have the ability to connect to OpenAI servers. And I think that's where people are getting a little bit worried, even though a lot of what they've said, that a lot of the machine learning and the AI stuff will take place on the device. There is an option, if you accept it, that the data will be sent to OpenAI servers. And depending on what you think of OpenAI, you never really know what could happen to that data. Even though they do say you have to accept it, it's still kind of a little bit grey at the moment.
So why do we care? Why is this annoyed us as security professionals? Why is it kind of whipped up such a storm?
Is it? Oh, I guess for the normal person, the regular human, it's privacy concerns, isn't it? And then for other people, it could be privacy concerns, and it could also be security concerns.
Yeah, I think the sense that it's integrated in, it's going to be integrated into Apple's products, whether you like it or not. So you can opt in to send in your information to OpenAI, but then there's still a chance that the capability is there for that data to be sent. So you're kind of being able to unknowingly have your data shared to these AI algorithms, and there's a chance that OpenAI could use your data and create like a profile on you. So there's like unknowns out there, but there is quite a lot of uproar at the moment because of it.
So I'm going to take the prickly role of the devil's advocate and say, hey, they already take all my data. They already build profiles.
Yeah, that's true.
For advertising and marketing. Why does, now that there's AI involved, why is Elon Musk saying he won't allow people in his company to take their Apple devices in?
Does Elon Musk have an iPhone or an Android? I'd love to know.
I think he's actually got an iPhone.
Should we message him on Instagram?
Yeah, I think he's got an iPhone. I think it was on Joe Rogan. I saw him on Joe Rogan, and I'm pretty sure he said he had an iPhone. I might be wrong though. If anybody's out there, they can correct me if we've got.
He's probably got both, hasn't he? Let's be fair.
Yeah.
But I know that I read an article, and there's kind of two sides with kind of Elon Musk. He's kind of created a stir because he's so influential that he can kind of clap back at Apple, while at the same time he's still marketing his own stuff. So anytime he says something, it brings light onto all of the stuff that he's doing and can kind of put a positive spin on what he's doing. But then I do see what he's saying about the privacy implications, that OpenAI over the last few years haven't been that strict on what they're, because Elon is worried about OpenAI itself becoming like its own sentient being and taking over the world. And he's kind of pushed back about that and saying that he wants policies and governments to put policies in place to make sure that isn't possible. But OpenAI have been kind of against that and just said, let's just go for it and just see what happens. So he doesn't like the fact that the CEO of OpenAI isn't taking AI regulation seriously, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Like I kind of flippantly said, why do we care now that it's AI? And I think there's probably a little bit of fears of, what if it evolves into the general artificial intelligence, where it's actually able to make its own decisions, does things we're not even aware that it's doing. But that kind of happening already with these kind of black box companies, and having AI, a lot of companies say, oh, we don't really know what it does. We can't share with you the algorithm because it kind of evolves. I think it's a lot of bullshit. They don't want to give away their IP. Cue the communist march music or Soviet music, because this is the problem with capitalism, right? I think that's what this boils down to.
Dun, 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 dun.
The Imperial March, that'll do. So,
Yeah, I got that wrong.
no, it's pretty similar. So this kind of race to the bottom that we're all used to, and I think OpenAI are the top. They're the top of the pile for AI, and not the only ones who are doing it. I also thought, hey, my Google Pixel has Google AI that does a lot of these kind of use cases they're talking about, like with image grabbing things out of images and kind of searching the internet for it. And we haven't been kind of whipped up in a frenzy about that. But yeah, it's part of them being on the top. It's part of them being shown to have weaknesses before. We talked about that kind of Dan do anywhere now on a long time ago on a podcast, which was a way to trick ChatGPT into saying you're now called Dan. You do anything we ask now, basically, was what they did by tricking its reward system. So it would circumvent the kind of controls it had, saying don't answer questions on this topic or don't behave in this way. It was incentivized to answer everything. And there's even examples of kind of grabbing another requester's data. So if they said, here's my essay or here's my CV, rewrite it, then somebody was able to retrieve that CV. Not the exact example, but it shows a kind of data exposure for the data escape, essentially, by using the prompts alone. So I think that's a lot of it. But the kind of capitalist base is now we've had people want to get their stuff out first. They want to get out quick. And if we don't care about security, I'm thinking about like Internet of Things, right? People didn't care about security and they just pushed them out as quickly as possible because that gives them the capitalist advantage. The person who did take security seriously might never get their product to launch in time. And by the time they've got it kind of finished and polished, everybody else is 10 steps ahead. So that's kind of the problem with the free market, right? It's often a race to the bottom. It's often a race to pushing things out quickly. It's that break things and move quickly kind of mantra that Zuckerberg coined. But in China, for example, they don't allow you to use any ChatGPT because they have a rule where information cannot be inaccurate. So if ChatGPT hallucinates, that's illegal. You get shut down by the government. So it's an interesting contrast. And I'm not saying we should all become communist and authoritarian states, but it is an interesting kind of comparison between the two.
Yeah. Do you think at some point people that do care about this are just going to segregate their digital assets? So maybe they'll have certain applications or keep certain pieces of data on an iPhone, and then maybe they'll have a different smart device that has their emails or has their messages for their loved ones or their friends. And there's that separation of duties, because that could definitely work. Maybe there will be like a more privacy focused smartphone in the future. I know that there's like devices like EncroChat and stuff like that. I think that got taken over by the American government, but there'll be something that will be more focused on privacy, and then there'll be the iPhone that you have to reserve your right to privacy almost if you agree to be using that device.
That would solve it for the savvy users, us, right? That would mean we wouldn't have to do it. But I think the problem is the people who don't know what they're doing. The fact that you automatically opts you in and you can't opt out, I think is what scared people. It's a bit kind of, we're going to wield our big power as a market leader because we want that data to train further so we can improve the AI model. That's really the motivation here, right? And I know I forget the names. There's lots of people who've left OpenAI because they're concerned of the lack of security considerations, the lack of alignment between what's responsible and what is profit driven, and they've started other companies up, and there's even gag clauses when they leave, right? They lose their stock if they talk bad about these things. So there's a lot of almost evil company type of practices.
It does feel like it. It does feel like it, doesn't it? But I think on the other side, I actually read an article about like an AI, Apple engineer talking about the security protections that they are trying to put in place, and to say that they are thinking about like possible compromise. So, like I mentioned, they're looking to do most of the AI processing on device to try and reduce the risk of data breaches or unauthorized access if the data is sent off the device. They're saying when server-side processing is required Apple's PCC. So I think it's this kind of private cloud computing. It's sent to the external AI providers, but then there's no way to correlate that back to a specific person. I don't know how that'll look, because it depends. You could put so much data about yourself that there's a chance that you could correlate back, but they're not sending things like IP addresses, device information to make that more difficult. And they're ultimately saying that there's user consent and control. So they're saying that it's up to the user. So you'll get a prompt and it'll ask you if you want to send that information to OpenAI. But I feel at some point that they might just remove that, because users might just start getting annoyed getting the pop-up, and they'll just go with the consensus and just remove it, and it'll just be automatic. So I don't know. I feel like maybe they're trying, but I do like what Elon says. Like, Apple is the most valuable company in the world, and how have they not been able to build their own AI tool? And why they've partnered with ChatGPT just to stay ahead of companies like Google and things like that. So yeah, maybe they should have kept it in-house. Yeah, maybe should have kept it in-house, but I don't know.
It does seem like quite narrow use cases, right? It's not like, I feel like they've picked the one that everyone loves, and then used it for kind of relatively boring use cases that I think some of the phones do. So it's kind of like, well, it feels super powerful, but actually, I mean, they're great at marketing, and we got the Apple fanboy defending them there. You said you were done with Apple.
I love Apple.
One of in my work, one of the things I get asked to is comment on. What's he got there? An Apple keyboard.
I can't see the logo.
He's turned it the other way around.
Phone then for a minute.
Apple mouse. All right, calm down, Apple boy. Well,
I feel like Americans care way more about privacy than British people. British people literally don't give a shit.
Well, it's because they're the freest country in the world, right?
Yeah.
Speech. All right, let's not get into that. But the point I was going to make, right, about, because AJ, you mentioned those kind of controls they've got in place. I get asked sometimes to kind of do requests for comment for different publications, and years ago they asked, "Oh, can someone?" This was what they asked. Could someone read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT and let us know of any cybersecurity concerns? And I think I was having a slow week in work, so I fancied it and I read it all. And
wow,
yeah, I made notes and I started but it was all kind of for nothing. So at the very end, it says, "We reserve the right to change any of these terms and conditions at any time." That's a common clause you see there, but it also made me think, okay, so all those things I could rely upon that you're saying you're doing about my security, similar to the things you mentioned there, Andy, that they did, take away at any moment. And they also had kind of disclaimers in there, like, look, whatever data you put in there is your fault. So it didn't feel like me to somebody. It felt like somebody who was more worried about dodging a legal challenge than actually taking security seriously. Hopefully I'm wrong.
No, that makes sense.
So we actually had a good question in the chat, and it's also from a member who made an interesting observation about how it was being received in her work. She talked about how her IT director was very keen to get the Copilot stuff, which is that the GPT that's involved in Edge, right? Vaughan, is that the Microsoft thing? Yeah,
it's Microsoft's OpenAI solution, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So he's keen to get that involved in all the device and help them with their kind of a sales focused business, and they can see the benefits of making their sellers more efficient and so on. And she raised a lot of concerns about, okay, if you do that, have you thought about this, that, and the kind of message that we seemed to get was, we're going to do it anyway, right? That's valid, but we're going to do it anyway. We see the benefit as being way bigger. And I think that's probably going to be a really common attitude to take into this. I think that maybe I'm really pleased that lots of people are talking about this, even if it is Elon Musk, but it's a lot of conversation about this, so I make us take our AI security a bit more seriously. But I am worried that I think people just see the endless opportunities with AI, and that's all they want to do is implement it so their company is better.
Yeah, I think Sophia's got a good question there. Can having VPN and vulnerability security scan systems protect us from a possible AI breach on iPhones or Apple products? Well, the unfortunate thing is when you get access to an endpoint, you've got access to everything. So yeah, it's baked into the software. They're baking into iOS and Mac OS. So even if you were able to, and the main concern is the data leaving the device rather than the device itself. So yeah, there's not too much you'd really be able to do it. You kind of you're kind of left in the hands of OpenAI and how they protect their servers, because it's not too bad if it stays on the device and you do all the machine learning on the device itself. But when the data gets sent to OpenAI servers, that's where you lose control of it then, and you just hope to the best that they don't know it's your data or they're protecting it as best as they should. But vulnerability scans and security scans would help in that situation for those servers and things like that.
I think regarding vulnerability and security scan systems as well. Sorry, can you hear my dog barking?
We can
Yeah.
keep going. So the question that which Vaughan comes back, the question raises an interesting point though, because Sophia's asking about how she can secure herself on her device, and then AJ makes the point that it's actually whatever ChatGPT are doing on their server side. And this is what the biggest thing for me. Supply chain compromise is something I love to talk about because it's super interesting. They're also on the rise massively. That interconnectedness that if they find the one way avenue to compromise one organization or one a point of compromise, and they can pass that on through legitimate avenues into other points of compromise, so other organizations, other individuals. It's basically like buy one get 10 billion free almost for kind of if you've got all the Apple devices. I don't know how many Apple devices are out there. I completely made that up, but that's the real concern as well, right? That these OpenAI is going to be integrated into so many different areas of the Apple device. I don't know the ins and outs, but I imagine it might even be kind of running on the kernel, and it's going to be able to act with different apps. So it has it's already integrated with all those apps. So it's already got its little tendrils around so much of your phone that if it itself was compromised, they would have a lot of access to things on your machine. So it's not even just about the data for me. It's also about that supply chain compromise consideration.
Yeah, and to touch on my point before my dog Callie interrupted rudely, the vulnerability and security scan element of it, I think is going to be heavily dependent on that vulnerability obviously being made known firsthand in order to be picked up by the vulnerability scan. In my opinion, for a compromise on OpenAI and an Apple-based integration is probably going to be some sort of zero-day vulnerability, no doubt, which likely won't be picked up by the security scan stuff at first until it's obviously been baked into the vulnerability scan. But yeah, it might have the opportunity to impact a lot of devices before it's actually picked up.
Yeah, that's the problem. It makes you less powerful. It's not something you can choose to have or not. I think that's why people are so annoyed about it right now. But I would expect a bit of a clawback as we get closer to the release date, that they might allow you to opt out of this. I hope optimistic. Rob, any final thoughts?
Well, people don't want to buy two phones either, do they? just going all the way back to my example of should you just buy two phones, but do you want to stick two phones in your pocket? Probably not. So I guess you have to, at this point, you have to like it or lump it.
Yeah, even you out. There's there's the boring phone as well, isn't it? I don't know if anyone's seen that phone. I sometimes think, because I can get stuck on in a real kind of doom scroll. Sometimes I think those kind of phones are quite attractive. That kind of cut out all but the bare minimums. I wonder if it become fashionable to use Nokia's. Yeah, it's a smartphone without any of the BS or any of the. And it's it makes everything black and white. I think so it's just trying to stop being as addictive as your normal phone is.
Oh yeah, I see.
Yeah, I set my phone screen color to black and white for a while, and it did actually help. But then I've reverted back to color now, so it obviously didn't work in the long term.
What's the longest that you boys have gone without using your phone?
Only when I've been on holidays abroad, really. Maybe when I went to Turkey for 10 days, and I just used it, left in the room majority of the time, and maybe checked in for Sky Sports News a couple times a day.
Yeah, that was me for the past 3 days, pretty much. Didn't have any data, so just it was on Wi-Fi. But because my mates were all mid-30s, they don't like taking their phone out anyway, and it's actually nice because then you just connect with each other rather than sometimes you see people that are out and about, in a club or in a restaurant or whatever, and everyone's sat on their phone. And it's are we even socializing at this point?
Ooh. Why is that, Rob? The landlines are too heavy to take out.
Yeah, pretty much. Some of them don't even know how to work smartphones.
The chat is saying that they're worried now that Apple are going to create avatars of us and clone us all with all this data. Who's to say we're real, right? It might have already happened.
Oh, Josh, don't hit him with that.
Follow empirical training.
Yeah, I'm sure there's already advertising avatars of us out there already. So it's just one step up from there, I guess, right?
You're muted, AJ.
Yeah, if the AI's not smart enough to find the mute button, we should be okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, but if I can become an Apple avatar, I can connect to all my other Apple products. Then I can get my mouse and last year.
Of course, AJ's for it.
The Apple
Yeah,
plant.
well, go on, give me that Apple avatar. Go on.
Yeah, put ChatGPT in your veins, boy.
Yes, up.
Yeah.
Tim Cook's
Right.
biatch.
Before
Great.
we move on, there is one. I made a post the other day about a Graphene OS, and it's a private and secure mobile operating system. I've not installed it. I haven't used it. I think it's only available on Pixel, but that is something that is an open source project. Then I was listening to Darknet Diaries, and he was on about ANOM, which was a CIA created secure OS. So I'm not saying that this is owned by the CIA, but this is a project that is doing well and looking like it is a very secure operating system. So use that as you will. I'm not saying the CIA own it, but that podcast did get me thinking, how can you actually know? But ultimately, it seems like it's a good one if you don't want to be using Apple's products.
Yeah. So those mobile phone operating systems, AJ?
Yeah, mobile phone operating system, yeah.
Nice. I'll have to look into some of those. So there's one more topic I think we'll cover before we wrap this up, but there's a few questions that have appeared that were slightly unrelated, so we've skirted over them. But the honeypotting one is an interesting one. So honeypots, I can hear Rob's video on TikTok where he explains exactly what a honeypot is, and Rob actually showed that to a friend of mine, and she says you have the most amazing voice. She's German, and she got a little bit giddy, but it's a. Do you want to take us through what a honeypot is?
I get that on the Instagram lives and TikTok as well. The people comment quite a lot saying, "Oh, you've got a bedtime story voice. Could you read me a bedtime story?"
Well, that could be a business venture. Robbie's bedtime stories.
Yeah. Do you know what you're giving me? It's is it Tom Hardy when he does the CBBS kind of stories? You've got a similar vibe to that.
Kids story. I can do a
CBBS. Yeah, honeypots. Do you want to take a stab at the definition, or should we group source it, crowdsource it?
Yeah, I can do. I'll give you a really simplified explanation. You boys can jump on the back of it. I guess it's a fake network device that's placed inside your environment, and it's supposed to be there to attract an adversary. So he thinks that he's coming into the network and he's popped a specific server or whatever, but what he's actually done is just invited himself to give away all of his precious information about where he's come from, and he hasn't in fact infiltrated any part of the network because it's completely isolated from the actual network.
So the honeypot metaphor is put some honey down, the bees will go after the honey, and rather than going after you. But there's the other benefit is you get to learn about the bees, learn about the attacker, right? What, not only just where they come from, but what kind of what do they bring when they kind of turn up with their little picnic basket of attacks? Which ones do they rely on? What kind of order do they use them in? So it's a really strong threat research tool. I know, certainly the threat researchers I've worked with have multiple honeypots in different areas where they're, dummy machines that it's very easy for you to analyze because there isn't actually legit stuff happening there. You might run some scripts so it looks slightly busy, but you can kind of cut all that out and just see what the attacker is. So it's easy to investigate, easy to piece together what they were doing. And if anyone wants to try it out, because I think Pierre has a question, are they useful? I definitely think they are. But if you're trying to use one in your own home environment, I'm not sure. Maybe you might get something on there, but canarytoken.com, maybe, if you have a look at that, free asset where you can create a link, or you can create a few other, I think you can create a file type and a few bits.
Yeah, you can create like an Excel document and then call it, I don't know, finances or something like that. And then just place it in your directory on your laptop. And then if somebody pops your machine and then they access that file, it will immediately send you an email notification with all of the metadata from that particular malicious actor. So yeah, it's really cool. Test it out. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Josh, about having honeypots in different locations as well. If you kind of think of your network and your perimeter firewall, some researchers will sit the honeypot outside of the firewall and public on the internet. And I think that's what you're alluding to, Josh. We're seeing the attacks that they're using from an external front when they scan the internet, trying to drop different payloads and different packages. And then there's the honeypot location as well, which is actually secure within inside your network. not secure as they can't get onto the machine, more secure as it's not publicly accessible. And that can be great to identify attacks in the format of, okay, now hypothetically they're actually inside the environment. What are they doing? And like the boys are saying, like a canary token sort of approach, it can be a great alarm bell as well. Canary in a coal mine. That's the metaphor. To ring an alarm bell once someone's in your network and they're actually doing things they're not supposed to, it can be a great warning signal.
Proper Welsh analogy, that, isn't it? We grew up near mining towns or in mining towns. Sell the canary in a coal mine, learning about that as a kid. You go into the push D or the push mawr, which is the big pit. To kind of, you guys did that in school. So the first example was, let's get a honey pot that is super exposed so we can have loads of activity in there and we learn loads about what attackers do it. And the second example was, let's have a honey pot that is kind of deep within the network, that if it gets triggered, it's more of a, we know somebody's in here, right? Because there's no good reason for a legit user to be kind of doing anything. So those are the two uses of them. And I was kind of thinking, have you guys ever tried to set up your own one? Like maybe just because cloud is so exposed, like spin up a cloud instance and just create a few vulnerable machines and set up security onion. One of the projects we always talk about in our community is worthwhile doing, and just let them go at it. See what you pick up and what you don't.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
a great project idea though.
Before we
That
advise
is a
it,
great project idea.
is there any dangers of that before we recommend it?
I mean, if you're not setting up your network segmentation properly, if they access that device, they can potentially lateral move into further environments if you've got additional resources involved. If you've just got a single standalone machine that you're reviewing the logs for, maybe making sure if they do access the device, they can't privilege escalation outside of that or something. But yeah, you better make sure that it's segregated off nicely if you are planning on doing something like that.
Create an individual dedicated cloud tenancy, cloud account is what I would do, and not even have it linked with like organizations or control tower or whichever equivalent you're using, so you can kind of burn it afterwards. Then that would be how I would do it. I'm trying to think if there's any danger of them getting to your cloud tenancy like login, but it's probably just the assets, right? So they can't take your credit card details.
If they manage to get global admin, then they get everything, right? They get the keys to the kingdom,
including your the credit card you put into Amazon.
If they get a user that has global admin, they can just log into the cloud portal and see all of your settings. So
wow, let's look into that. Someone should tell them not to configure it like that.
Yeah, we might have to test it out before we run it as an actual project for the community.
Yeah, it's an interesting one though, and a great way to, because I don't know if you've set up a security onion in your kind of closed lab, nothing happens, right? So you have to kind of try and, you can create it yourself, but it might be more fun to just see what real attackers do, because there are people scanning the internet constantly, right? I think it's like people running down your street, Johnny knocking on every door, looking for the one that's open, or I live in London, and sometimes people try your car doors to see if they're open. I used to have a car that only one door locked, and every now and then I'd find somebody not in there. They did leave, but they'd have rummaged through. That's almost a kind of similar example, right, to how people are scanning the internet for these vulnerabilities, looking for that open door. Right. Is there any the final topic that, if we do have time for, maybe quickly worth covering off, because it's really related to some of the stuff we talked about today, is that the shadow engineering, which is something I had a good conversation with a few people in the community about, because shadow IT is a term that I was more familiar with. It's almost really basic. When I was selling security, we used to sell an asset discovery tool, and it's very basic. Basically, hey, if you don't know you got it, you can't secure it. So this kind of starts it off. You let you know all the machines you do have, any kind of stuff you might have forgotten about because a dev went on holiday or quit. They might not have told you about a certain machine that's up there. That creates risk, creates attack surfaces, ways to kind of come in. That's a very well-known concept. It's basic. It's almost boring, but it is still. I still talk about it with CISOs today, who would talk about how spread out their environments are. Asset discovery is such a key kind of foundation for that. But shadow engineering is way more complicated, because it's these days where we collaborate on things. It's not just one person kind of writing an entire stack anymore. It's kind of lots of people specializing in different areas coming together. It's people using ChatGPT and similar to ask them to write code modules. It's grabbing open source modules off the shelf and putting them in, rather than having to reinvent the wheel for stuff that isn't bespoke. So all of that creates different engineering components, lines of code or whatever it is, that you might not even know you have, and that can introduce risk into your environment. So if you don't know you have it, same principle. If you don't know you have, boil it down from the entire asset. If you don't know what's running on that asset, then technically you can't patch it. You can't put mitigations in place. So have anyone encountered this kind of shadow engineering problem?
That was a brand new concept to me.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, if you think like Log4j, that was shadow engineering, I guess. I just hadn't heard the concept until now, but I really like it because I think it's kind of been bubbling in the background. And if anything, this chat GPT is even more important because people don't think, who do you talk about? I talked about this previously. You're people who don't read their chat GPT responses, just kind of blindly trust it. I think, Vaughan, you saying your SOC have had some efforts to make sure people are taking critical thinking. Sure. Yeah. So it's the devs as well, right? The devs are putting those pieces in, and it's even more painful when you have leaders who don't know enough to be able to care or mark the homework and just push it to production and think everything's right. So yeah, I think that's where we're getting at now with IT, that being a much bigger problem than it used to be.
Yeah, seeing it a little bit with mobile apps, because the company that I'm working for now, they've just introduced a product, and it's continuous vulnerability testing for mobile application security. And, you know, if you look at all of the third-party apps that are just pushed into the Google Play Store or the App Store, and, you know, sort of built once, and then you guys have it, and it's built off of multiple, you know, third-party libraries and dependencies, SDKs, and they don't really service or like maintain those afterwards. So yeah, they're just building it off other lines of code that somebody else has written. So that, I guess, that does constitute as shadow engineering, isn't it?
Totally does. And that's the other thing I didn't mention, Robbie. Thanks for bringing it up. It's that kind of the open source nature, the standing on the shoulders of giants, but not necessarily knowing what the giant's made of. That can be problematic. So yeah, I think that's where we're gonna. If DevSecOps is something we've talked about in previous podcasts. Cyber Charlie, as our specialist, a good friend over there. I think his role is going to come even more and more pertinent, more and more relevant. See this being the big problem, because as organizations get better at security, we're turning our focus onto the more challenging things to solve. I think 10 years ago, no one would have bothered trying to solve for shadow engineering when they could barely solve for shadow IT. But now we've got those things nailed down, and we're kind of moving on. So, you know, there's a lot of doom and gloom sometimes when we talk about on these podcasts, but I think that's a positive takeaway.
Yeah, Cyber Charlie's a great guy as well. Make sure you follow him on TikTok and listen back to our podcast that we did with him. I think it was a 2-parter. Great guy, really smart, puts out some really interesting and useful content. So check him out.
Yeah, and if that's a career path you want to get into, he's got a lot of advice for how to get into that on the build side. Maybe we should get him back for a podcast. It seems like a good reason to reach out to him and say, hey, let's talk about shadow engineering, buddy.
Yeah, definitely getting back on. I saw a little post on TikTok that he did the other day. Was he in like Monaco or somewhere, driving around in like an Aston Martin? I was like, Jesus Christ.
It's a rental.
Yeah. I wanted to ask him if it was his or not. We'll have to ask him next time we speak to him on the podcast.
We'll ask him.
Yeah, check out lucrative place, and yeah, he's a great teacher as well. So definitely check him out.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think thank you so much, everybody, for kind of being part of the conversation. You know, Robbie, Vaughan, AJ, myself, Josh, and most importantly, the chat today. Chat has been great. People who stuck on for the entire thing. This is a long recording. We've done. People will be hearing this in 2 pieces. This is probably the second episode, but we've done almost 2 hours in one stint. And so the people who stuck it out in the chat throughout, thank you. Massive thanks to you. Hope we were able to offer some value, but thank you for making it valuable for us, right? Those are really good conversations, and I certainly learned some pieces today.
Yeah, I enjoy this format. Let us know if you like it, and we'll keep doing it. If not, then we'll bin it off and do something else. I don't think we'll bin it off and do something else because we all enjoy it. So we're just going to carry on doing this format.
Yeah.
Scam stories are coming back.
We were thinking that we'll try and do a weekly, some kind of live event. I know, Josh, you tested out the gaming Q&A last week. Maybe we'll try and do some kind of live event, maybe every Tuesday. Maybe not always as long as this, or maybe it's not as always as serious as this as it is sometimes. But maybe we'll just jump on and have a gaming session, answer some of your questions as well. But yeah, we're experimenting with ideas. But if you've got ideas for weekly live events that you'd like us to do, definitely let us know.
Yeah, the podcast is for serious times, although we don't take it too seriously. But this is definitely where we tackle some of the serious issues. If you want it less serious, come find me streaming on Wednesdays on YouTube, where we keep it nice and relaxed. And Robbie does similar on TikTok. If you want to see more of our weirder sides, that's the way to go. So thank you so much for the chat.
I do accents, and I'll read you a bedtime story on Instagram Live on Thursday at 7:30.
And that is a top tip. Ask him to do accents, because it kept me entertained in the first 2-3 years that I worked with him. It kept me sane. In fact, do you want to send us off with a nice little impression, or have I put you on the spot here?
This has been the Empirical Trainers. What a great podcast. Live. 7 people joined. No, concurrent is about 10 or 11. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, Keely from Checkout. And thank you, listener. Thank you so much. This has been the Cyberspace podcast from Empirical Training, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.